I was rejected a million times. And the real key to making art is not giving a fuck.
Michael.
Hi, how are you?
Good, my friend. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Thanks so much.
No, my pleasure. What's been going on in your world?
Just creating art, Stuart.
What you do best?
Yeah. Wait, let me get this set up right. Sorry about that. There we go.
No, you're fine.
Can you see me? Oh yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Perfect. Thanks for making the time, Michael. I really, really appreciate it. You've been very, very heavily requested as someone that people want to hear from. So for those that don't know about Michael, Michael's an internationally renowned artist. It's been exhibited in the likes of the Met and Museum of Modern Art and many, many other places. So I have a ton of questions today, Michael, but the thing that most interests me is how fluid your transition to Web3 has been, more fluid than most, to be quite frank. And there was something quite prophetic. So I was listening to an interview of yours from 1981 the other day.
Okay, cool.
And in the interview, you said, and this is something that I've said on previous podcasts, how I want to take away the romanticization of artists not making money. And the quote that you had was, I don't like the myth of an artist that struggles all their life and their paintings go unnoticed. Then a strong genius is discovered. It's inconceivable that out of 80 galleries in New York, there isn't one that wants to challenge the conventions of today.
Right.
That feels prophetic.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, well, I still feel that way. Actually, I feel that, most of the natural tendency for us all, of course, is to fit into conventions. And the job of an artist is actually to find a real original voice. Now, when they do, that's going to be quite difficult for any conventional business operation because business generally operates with conventions. So this is one of the reasons why I really embrace Web3 is that, there's room for artists to really divert from conventions and follow something truly, truly unique. Now, when you do that, that doesn't necessarily guarantee anything. But what it does allow for is really personal expression. And I think that's really, personal and unique expression. And I believe that's really the role of artists in our society, to be kind of vanguards. So, and also another thing about Web3 that I've embraced, which is opposed to what I would call the brick and mortar art world, the conventional art world, is because it's sort of limits artists. It sort of tries to impose a very conventional, limited style on all the artistic output there. And, we live in a large world with a lot of different people from a lot of different places, exploring very unique streams simultaneously. Different kinds of art. So there's room for that in Web3. There isn't really room for that in the so-called conventional art world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Conventions are going to be encouraged. So therefore, actually, I think pretty much the most miserable artists or least creative artists are going to be applauded.
And the role of the curator in the traditional art world almost acts as a barrier to creative expression.
Well, that's actually kind of an interesting phenomenon because, a lot of people, get some sort of education in art and art history, and they find they're unemployable. They can't go anywhere. And really, it's very difficult to become a curator. So by the time they actually go through the filter of the entire system, they're as conventional and conforming as they possibly can be. So they're going to serve the interests of business and not serve the interests of artists.
And you think that Web3 is obviously removing that layer of commercial.
There's a lot of freedom. There's commerce in Web3, obviously, and there has to be commerce because artists need to be to find a way to support themselves. There's nothing wrong with commerce. I'm not against commerce. In fact, I'm in favor of a more robust commerce. But I think that the commerce that exists and can exist in Web3 is absolutely freer. Artists are capable of finding their own unique audience. Unique audience can support them. They don't have to conform. They can really be themselves and actually find an audience that is excited by that.
Yeah. And I've been helping a couple of artists behind the scenes with some business stuff because naturally they're not two worlds that are symbiotic sometimes.
Right.
And artists don't love the idea of the social media and all that sort of stuff that goes with it, but unfortunately it's essential sometimes.
Right. Well, social media can be very tiring, and it can be very tiring for anybody. But if you just simply think of it as this is the tool that you have in order to open up direct line of communication with your audience, then you can have kind of a different attitude towards social media. And of course, there's room to do it creatively, and you don't have to do it the same way everybody else does it. So, I find there are less limitations in Web3 than there are in the typical brick and mortar art world, the gallery system, those people that patronize the gallery system on the top. It's kind of a racket, not a very interesting racket, actually.
It's so useful and essential for us in Web3 to have someone with your traditional art experience to be able to cross those bridges and help us understand how we can integrate the two worlds, because there are positives about
I don't think it's necessary to really integrate the two worlds. This is actually an interesting thing. I think Web3 is doing fine on its own, and I think there's there's a certain measure of insecurity among a lot of artists that they would like to be accepted by the so-called established art world. That's a lot of crap. They're certainly gonna accept you if you make a lot of money. So, but that doesn't say anything about your art. So, and this is really actually a phenomenon in art anyway. If you make a work of art and it sells for $10 million, that doesn't really mean anything other than it sold for $10 million. Just it doesn't mean it's any good. It doesn't mean it's worthwhile. It doesn't mean anyone's going to remember it. It does mean you have $10 million, and that's a great thing, because that allows artists to be supported. But, I also think there were many times in my lifetime when I couldn't make a single sale, and I still put my all into the art, and I think I was creating great art. And in fact, a lot of those things sold years later. And so I think, artists have to be aware that sales and prices are not the measure of their worth.
Because you didn't make your first sale until the age of 23, I think it was.
Well,
give or take.
I think later than that. I don't really remember. I was in my 30s. I had a really hard time, and I persisted, because I loved making art. And, and I don't really even look back on that and think badly of it, because actually there were a lot of things that, perhaps I could have done that were more conforming. I could have kissed a lot of ass. I could have done society portraits. I could have tried to ingratiate myself with the so-called richest art collectors in the business and conform to what they wanted. And that would have just led me down a rabbit hole of misery. I did what I wanted, and I was very, very lucky, and it turned out very well. But I think part of the way it turned out really well is that I'm a very resourceful person. And I think artists need to look at it like that. Instead of looking at authority and wanting praise from authority, figure out how to use your resources. Figure out how to make money in many different ways. Figure out how to just support yourself in life.
Yeah. And I remember one of your tweets, which stuck with me quite significantly, to be honest, where you laid out the physical rejection letters from every gallery.
Yeah,
Can
I was
you
rejected by
explain
tons
what
of
that was?
galleries.
Can you explain what that tweet was?
Well, I was thinking about it. A lot of these artists that talk to me and they look up to me as a very successful artist, and really, it's easy to look successful. But there are many. I was rejected a million times, and the real key to making art is not giving a fuck and not really thinking that this person's rejection really means anything. It's insulting. It's nasty. It doesn't really feel good. But the bottom line is you absolutely have to believe in yourself under all circumstances and persevere. If you're going to make art, make art. If you're not going to make art, do something else. And, you make common sense decisions. You figure out, well, people need this or need that, and you satisfy those needs. That is not the job of an artist. Artists are not there to satisfy the needs of other people. Artists are there to create something inspiring, perhaps magical, perhaps spiritual, something beyond necessity that is more needed and more of a necessity than we can anticipate going into it.
It ties in one of the first podcasts I had with Matt Scoble, who I know you know. We said that your art should define your audience and not your audience define your art.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think
Matt's a good friend of mine. Matt's an extraordinary artist, and actually, about those rejection letters, it was Matt's idea, more or less. I talked to him about the rejection letters, and he said, "Wow, that'd be great if you put that out there." So yeah, Matt's an awesome artist. Love Matt.
So just going back to the start of your journey, Michael, if you don't mind, because I know you grew up in a family that had obviously gone through a significant amount of trauma, which is reflected in your work down the line. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about your upbringing?
Sure. Well, my parents were Holocaust survivors, and actually, the worst that could possibly happen happened to them. Their entire families were brutally killed by the Nazis because of prejudice, because they were Jewish, and they somehow managed to survive, but they were very scarred emotionally, psychologically, on all levels from that. And, they were great parents, but that was a very obvious thing to me that, this was my reality as a human being coming into the world, that the world's pretty brutal. And, I started making art from that point of view, because we make art from who we are and what our experience of the world is. And I think, it's maybe a cliche to say, but art can heal the world. I think on some level, I was making art. I'm making art in order to heal myself, in order to deal with things that are unimaginable. The kind of wholesale slaughter that went on in the Holocaust is really perhaps unimaginable, but it's a fact. And that's, a very difficult reality that can only really be dealt with through documentary and through artistic coming to terms with this kind of reality that we're born into. And so this is part of my inspiration as an artist.
And it's reflected in your art through the hand, which I've noticed in multiple pieces. Can you describe what the hand is?
Well, it's almost a cliche to put it into words, but I did paint this painting in 1981 called The Selecting Hand, because it was very obvious to me as a young child, hearing stories of Joseph Mengele choosing people that would live or die, and he just pointed one way or another with his hand. And that sort of represented the absolute brutality of what human beings can do to each other, and how brutal life really can be. I think trauma is universal. I, of course, come from this background of the Holocaust, but there are many traumatic forces in the world that have affected many different ethnicities. And I think it's something that many people share. And then there's, other, we're all born powerless and are victims of some sort to the, forces of others. We all know what vulnerability feels like. Mental health is really important to everybody. A lot of people suffer. Suffering is universal. I think these are all the subject of art. Art is not just about expressing an aesthetic beauty. Art is not just about expressing, just a beautiful, pretty vision of things.
I feel like the best pieces that I see challenge me to understand my perceptions of myself through your attempt to understand your perceptions of yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's true about all art, all great art. I think actually, a lot of time as an artist is spent looking at great works of art throughout history, and a lot of time as an audience member, non-artists are looking at great art throughout history. And we have that in common, which is a shared conversation of trying to come to a reckoning and an understanding of what it's like to be human. That's what art is really about. It's really an extraordinary thing that human beings have, this ability to create a vision of themselves, to try and understand themselves. I'm all in favor of more art in the world. I think it's a positive force for all of us.
Which goes back to us making sure that making money through art is not seen as a shameful act. Because if artists have money, they have more time to create.
That's also, yeah, absolutely. And that's why, it can't be a shameful act. I think artists that have low self-esteem or feel that, that they shouldn't be selling their art, I think there's a lot of problems with that attitude. And I think it should be questioned. I think artists are entitled to make a living. They provide something really valuable to people. And actually, the possibility of doing that in Web3 is really phenomenal on a grand scale. Whereas the possibility of doing it the other way, when there were middlemen and galleries and arbiters of fashion, I think it was very, very limited, and a lot of artists found themselves closed out. I don't think you can get closed out in an open metaverse. And I really absolutely feel that gives artists the freedom to concentrate on what's most important, and that is creating great art. And creating great art requires a lot of attention and focus, and your chances of succeeding are much, much better off in Web3. In the brick and mortar world, artists often compare themselves to like the biggest stars in the art world. While it is true that there are artists that make hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, it's a tiny, tiny percentage of them. Now in Web3, it's also true, people made $69 million. So that's great. And that's wonderful for people. But there are so many artists that are making a living in Web3 because of Web3. You don't need to look at people and say, oh, I've got to do it like people did it. And part of how people did it was just absolute luck. And I don't mean to denigrate people on any level. He's very, very, very lucky. And that's phenomenal. There are other artists that perhaps don't have the luck to find somebody that's willing to spend $69 million on them, but they can find a community of people that will help them develop and support as artists, even if it's buying art for very low prices in multiples for a long period of time. It doesn't really matter.
I think what is important about sales like People's is that it gives outsiders an opportunity to think maybe I should give that a go. So I
Yeah,
think we'll have a new
absolutely.
wave.
You know, I'm all in favor of that. I want to be very, very clear. Beeple has brought a lot of people and some of the other really big famous artists that have done phenomenally well in this ecosystem. That's great. They bring a lot of attention to this ecosystem. And it is a very different situation than it is in the brick and mortar art world. When you look at artists like Anselm Kiefer or George Boslet, these are very unique. Most people do not have the opportunity to duplicate the kind of success those guys had. Now, in Web3, it is true. I might not have the opportunity to duplicate the success that people have, but I've got a million other opportunities in order to succeed and thrive and support myself. And that's what matters.
Yeah, I agree completely. And speaking of famous artists, I believe you actually met Francis Bacon.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, he's an extraordinary artist I admired and still do to this day. That was a real thrill for me to meet Francis Bacon. Yeah, it was very cool. And I showed him my work. He liked it. And I think that's the best example. His generosity was just really extraordinary to me. He was very generous with me as a young artist and, you know, just made me feel incredible. It was wonderful.
And I think you are having that effect on some artists in
I hope
Web3
so.
at the minute.
I hope so, and I think actually that's something I learned from Francis Bacon, to really look to the future and look at young artists' work seriously. He's a great man, great artist.
How did it come about?
He was having a show in Marlboro in New York City, and he was flying in on the Concorde for one day. And, I was in a gallery at the time, Rosa Essman Gallery in Soho, and she was invited to go to the show, and she invited me to come along and meet Francis Bacon. So that was just a lucky thing of that day. I was just unbelievably excited and thrilled.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it goes down as one of the most historical artists of all time. So that would be inspiring, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's a really great artist. And I always felt I was in that tradition. I came from that tradition of dealing with trauma and the most extreme forms of human existence. So I admired him immensely from way before I met him. So it was a real exciting moment to meet him.
Because everyone, general perception of Francis Bacon is that he's a little bit cantankerous, let's say. But obviously,
he was really very sweet. He was really very, very sweet. Yeah, I actually heard that the day before he got to New York, he was taken on a tour and he saw some paintings, and I remember the artist he saw, and he reacted really with real passion against it, and he was very, very critical. So I was very insecure when I met him. I was wondering, I was showing him my work, and I was just, I was prepared for him to hate it, but he liked it, and he was really nice to me, and I take that as a real huge compliment. It was just wonderful.
And we need more people like that in the Web3 space that aren't shouting into the echo chamber. If art is good, if it's shit, it's shit. For people like Francis, who obviously know an exceptional amount about it, to say those sort of things, I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I don't. I think artists should be honest with each other and honest about other art. I think one thing about criticism that I want to be very clear about is, I've been doing this a really long time. I've been an artist for 50 years, and, you get to understand yourself a little bit in 50 years. And one thing I do realize is that as an artist, you have to be very, very self-focused. You have to really believe in your work and believe it's better than everyone else's. And that is really part of what it's very difficult to go on without that kind of extraordinary focus on your own work and belief in your own work. But you also have to understand that is a bit of a psychological dance of a perspective that isn't necessarily about what's a fact. It's about the stance you need in order to make great art. And so you have to really kind of have an open mind about a lot of people's work and take a leap of faith and understand that they also are in it to the max. So it's not necessary for other artists to criticize other artists. There's a lot of work I see, and I don't necessarily understand where it's coming from because I'm naturally very focused on mine. It's very easy to be nasty. It's very easy to say, well, I don't think that's very good. You know, that's trite nonsense. So while I do believe we all have to be very, very honest with each other when we're friends, talking to each other, I don't really believe artists should go around criticizing and being negative about other artists' work because they just don't know where that stuff's coming from. You know, it's very hard to understand what's in another person's mind. It's practically impossible. Art is a very, very intimate thing. So it's like saying to somebody, your child is ugly. You know, there's no place for that. There's just really, really no place for that. So I think there has to be a kinder, more generous attitude about creativity in general. The other thing is I believe that as artists, we're not really competing with each other. You know, in all the years that I've done this, I've met a lot of art collectors and I've sold a lot of art. And I've never met one single art collector that collects only one artist. You know, art collectors collect a lot of art. There's room for everybody. Collecting is very different from creating art. And so I think artists don't need to be competitive. We can all actually support each other and encourage each other. And there's a lot of beauty in that. And we also learn things. You know, I've looked at a lot of art that's just totally not like my own and really gotten a lot of insight into it and learn things that I also apply, to my work. You know, there's example, and in Web3, there's real examples of things that are so absolutely, totally different, not just stylistically from what you do. So let's take, let's say I'm a figurative expressionist painter. I use figures to express emotions. And basically, that's a commonality I have with all of my work. It's basically always figurative, and I'm always trying to express emotions. But, AI art and generative art, which is so totally different than what I'm doing, actually is fascinating to me. And there's so many aspects of it that I try to think of in terms of, what is the similarities? Where is it coming from that's the same thing? Is my mind, for example, generative? I mean, it's a very simple thing. And how much does chance play? Take one of the, Dmitry Cherniak's piece, The Goose. It was a chance event of a programming algorithm. It's kind of fascinating how much in common do I have actually with that too, mentally. So I think artists in Web3 can really gain a lot from the absolute tremendous variety of what's out there. It informs us all. It's really like being present in a modern day Renaissance. That's how I see it. So I don't really see any value in criticism or negativity besides, judging things is very temporal. You could say, I think this is shit, and 5 years later, you're going to change your mind. So what's the point of even saying it now? Just create.
I think, excuse me, I think balancing criticism, acceptance, and dismissal is quite important, and something that was quite freeing for me when I was younger. I used to take criticism to heart quite extensively, but as I got older, I realized that I'll only accept criticism from people that are in the places that I want to be, people that have achieved the things that I want to achieve. Francis Bacon, prime example. If he was to criticize your art, you would take it on the chin and say, okay, he's right about this, this, and this, probably. So I think finding that balance of knowing when to dismiss criticism and be thick-skinned, and knowing when to channel it into bettering yourself is a hard one for particularly young artists, I imagine.
Yeah, and actually, keep in mind, Francis Bacon, as great a painter as he is, he could be wrong also about someone else's painting.
Yeah.
So, because, he might be right in the moment, but if that artist follows their heart in what they're doing, which is a total different direction, they're going to arrive somewhere else and it's going to be genuine. So, I don't really see the value in artists criticizing each other.
Yeah. And on the generative piece, I'd love to get your thoughts on some of it because I'm trying to get my head around it. So I minted 2 generative pieces this morning, and while I was thinking about it, it feels like a collective psyche. So at the minute, the world's going through a transition of human to computer in some ways. And I feel like the fact that the generative is brought up to a point by the person and then taken over by the computer, I think there's something that we all psychologically both fear and encourage in that transition.
Right. Well, this is temporary. This is a moment in time. And I'm sure there's going to be other things in 20 years or in 5 years. And I think as artists, we all can go with whatever's happening in the moment and see where it goes. I'm pretty fascinated. I actually find AI and generative art extraordinarily liberating because I am, one of my children has a PhD in math, and he's often told me that, it's possible to scan in all my work and create some sort of algorithm that would create a kind of predictive making of new Michael Hafftka paintings. And while that is true on a certain level, they still would not be Michael Hafftka paintings because I don't know how I'm going to change. Events outside of me change me. So I actually find AI and generative art extraordinarily liberating because it reaffirms my own uniqueness. And I actually think, I'm going to keep creating and, I'm somehow going to get out of my own. It's a challenge to get out of your own repetitions. That there's no doubt about that. I play music, and repetition is a very important tool in perfecting a physical skill of playing something. But at the same time, repetition is a great limitation when you're trying to create something new and you don't want to be limited to what you've already learned. So there's a great balance that you have to play with as an artist. And I think part of human life is to try and figure out how to renew oneself at every age, even 69 years old, where life is dynamic, life is beautiful. And I think one of the really great, beautiful things about it is that we can figure out a kind of newness at every point if we want to.
There's a life in seasons, I think
Yeah.
I've read before. And
Yeah.
I hope that my life continues to be like that. One of the things that you were saying there, I think my issue with some of the generative and AI, and I love it also, but when you were talking earlier, your trauma or your understanding of your trauma gets understood by yourself as you're creating the pieces. So you don't know
Right.
exactly where it's going to go,
Right.
but that's the point because you're trying to understand those underlying emotions.
Right.
And I feel like some part of that could potentially be lost.
Well, some part of a lot of things are lost in all sorts of things. So, generative art and AI art are not going to be the only art in the world. So I don't think we need to worry about what's being lost. When you drive in a car, you're not flying in an airplane. So you're not flying. You've lost the ability to fly. When you're in an airplane, you're not driving. You've lost the ability to drive. We can't do everything at once. So I don't think we need to start worrying about what's lost because life is full of extraordinary variety.
Yeah, and it's beautifully put, to be honest. When did you start to feel or see some success in the art world?
I was in my late 30s, and that's a good question because I think a lot of artists should understand there's no definitive moment. that you think, oh, you're guaranteed you're going to be a success. And I've met a lot of very successful artists, even here in Web3. I know quite a few artists who are extraordinarily successful. They don't feel they're guaranteed their next sale. They don't feel like, oh, it's a done deal. The next piece is going to go for 100 ETH. They're working and working at it. And, there's no moment you really feel I've made it completely, because there's a lot of factors that can change that. You can go out of fashion as quickly or as slowly as you went into fashion. I think, I've always focused on creating more, while it's true that there are some moments where you feel like you've done phenomenally well when you sell for a lot of money, but there's no guarantee that that's going to happen again. So, I don't really focus so much on that. Yeah.
And it goes to it's an interesting world for artists as well, because they need to understand finance, budgeting, and those sort of things when it comes to this. Because if you get one large sale, the last thing you want to do is go and spend it all and not give yourself the runway to create more pieces.
Yeah, I actually did that in life many years ago. It was a huge, I made mistakes, but you live and learn. I didn't know what I was doing. There's no, if hindsight is 20/20. That's a great saying. I've learned a lot of things, and I watch young people make mistakes. Mistakes are the way we learn. That's what experience really is. So I wouldn't be too harsh on myself about that. You just got to live and learn.
If I said I haven't bought any stupid shit before, I think I would be a flat out liar.
Right.
I bought many stupid things. And then how did you end up in time? Obviously, there'd be a bit of a transition between you start to feel a little bit of success. How did you end up in places like the Met and Museum of Modern Art?
Well, each one of those moments, there were different circumstances that got me into those museums. It could be very simple, as one collector telling a curator, you ought to look at Michael Haffka's work, and then everything goes well. A collector could tell a curator, you ought to look at Michael Haffka's work, and then the curator gets hit by a bus. That's happened to me too. So lots of stuff happens. So there's a bit of luck involved in each one of those things. I think that's true for all artists, and also the process changes over time. The world was a little less congested when I was starting out. It was even less congested 20 years before. It was easier to be successful as an artist. And that's one of the things also that makes Web3 so delicious, is that this is a change which allows more people to succeed. So I think that's phenomenal too.
If you allow me to, I'd like to challenge some of the stuff on the luck, because I'm not a big believer in luck personally. And when I read your backstory and when I hear you speak, there's been an exceptional amount of work that's gone into it.
Right.
You've literally sat in front of galleries on the street trying to sell pieces.
Absolutely.
You've got in contact with hundreds of galleries. So although there is an element of luck sometimes, and I agree that someone could get a bus or anything, you've put yourself in a position to increase your likelihood of success.
Absolutely. I think that's very important. I work at it all the time. I still do. It's part of who I am. I think as an artist, you have to have a real obsession with not only creating the art, but getting it seen. It's up to you. You can't really expect other people to take over and say, wow, this stuff is great. I'm going to show it. I believe in it, because it just doesn't happen that way. Even in Web3, there are other people that look at your work. Well, they're hoping to make some money off of it often. So, and if it doesn't, if it goes down, they're not going to be interested in it. But you as an artist have to be interested in your work and its survival, whether it's up or down. So, yeah, I don't want to focus. I do often talk about luck because, I see luck's a factor, but I work all the time. and sometimes it's discouraging, sometimes it's tiring, sometimes it's downright depressing. But if you don't do it, you're not going to get anywhere. So you just have to do it.
I think I completely agree with the luck part, and luck will always be a percentage of the chance of success that you have. I think you can diminish that percentage of luck by increasing workload in the right places.
Yeah.
If you go to more galleries, if you market yourself more, if you get your work out there and it's good, the percentage chance of it needing to be lucky diminishes.
Right. But you also have to keep in mind that personality plays a role in it.
Mm-hmm.
Some artists can't really do it. I mean, a great example is Van Gogh. Van Gogh really was, the kind of person that really couldn't advocate for himself. He probably had some psychological issues that screwed him up. In a certain way, he was great artist. He was capable of creating, and perhaps he had some serious deficiencies. And that's life. That's just who he was. Whereas another artist, might have more ability in that department than they even have in the creative department. So, I would go with Van Gogh rather than I would say to artists, go all the way with your work first. Yes, you do have to work at it all the time. There are many times that I'm just sick of working at it. And I just say, I just don't want to be disturbed. I just want to paint. I want to draw. I want to just open my iPad and draw on it or paint a painting. And I want to have nothing to do with promoting my work, because you just get fed up, and I'm sure everyone does. And people probably gets fed up with, I have seen him being interviewed a lot of times. He looks like, he's got a great sense of humor, and he rolls with the punches, and everybody always asks him, how much money are you making and all that, and he must get sick of that crap and just want to do some work, but he does it. And I'm sure there are times when he just says, you know what, I'm fed up, I just want to sit here with my computer and draw.
I think some people underestimate that, the administrative side of being an artist, in terms of, I mean, you're going to be emailing curators, you're going to be emailing collectors, you're going to be going backwards and forwards doing interviews. I can imagine it could be exhausting.
Yeah, sometimes it's just too much, and it just gets in the way of creating. So you just say, I just don't want to do it, and you just drop it for a while.
But then if you don't do that, your art doesn't sell for a price that you are happy with, which then gives you the runway to create more art. So it's a bit of
it's a balance. So you have to sometimes go back to it. You just figure it out. You figure out what works for you, and you just keep plugging away at it. There are no guarantees.
Over your long tenure in the game, let's call it. Yeah. There's always one piece that, as an artist, you probably got completely lost in, of your own making, I should say. Do you remember which piece that was, or is there a specific one? That's an interesting question. Is there one piece that I think is the greatest, or is there one piece that I got lost in? And I don't think of it like that. Honestly, I don't, because I get lost in every piece, and I work hard at every one. But there's one piece that I painted. I painted a portrait of my father, and my father, he was very judgmental about me being an artist, because he really wanted the best for me, and he would have preferred if I was just a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. And so he was a very judgmental guy, and he was a very strong guy, and I painted a portrait of him. And I remember when I think it's an extraordinary painting. I really love it. It's beautiful. And when he finally looked at it, and he said to me he was really proud of it, and he really
thought he was really proud of being painted that way. That was a really moving moment for me because it was just so important to finally please that guy. You
Yeah.
know, it's very hard. And so I remember that, and I'm very proud of that. And, you know, it's just a personal thing for me.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
My father's similar, very, very stoic
Yeah,
gentleman. I came out of university and went to an investment bank because mom and dad thought that was cool. And you know what? I think one of the switches in my life was when, similar to you, you kind of follow what your parents want you to do, but what they want you to do is generally based out of love and
yeah,
wanting the best for you.
yeah,
But another thing that I've realized quite recently is sometimes you've got to let other people's dreams for you die so that you
yeah.
can live your own dreams.
Absolutely. I never regretted making my own choice, and you know, as I say, I was very proud that moment my father saw that I somehow succeeded in this crazy business of being an artist.
And it is
Yeah,
crazy. And it's funny because other people want the best version of you that suits them.
right.
I often find so they want you to be happy and healthy because then they'll enjoy catching up with you better. They want you to be successful because they've got a successful friend. And that's not to speak for everyone that doesn't have that sort of thing, but I think more often than not, you've got to put yourself first.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What have you been working on recently? Anything fun?
Yeah, I'm just always working on the next thing, you know, the next, and that it's not a conceptual idea, it's the next image. So I've just been working on some digital pieces, and I actually recently completed, I can't show it because it's going to be revealed, but I've been working on a physical piece for the Paris show that's entitled Pepe and Me, and I'm very,
Yeah.
very, very proud of it. It's an extraordinary painting. It'll also be a fake rare, and I can't wait to show it. I really absolutely am like flipped out in love with this painting, and I'm very excited that it'll be in the Pepe show in a gallery in Paris, and
Oh,
it'll also be a fake rare. So really, I'm so excited about that.
I think everyone will be excited about that. You've really latched on to Pepe. You love a bit of Pepe, Michael.
Yeah, yeah, I really love Pepe. Pepe's really extraordinary for me because, you know, Pepe is part of the community. It's really phenomenal, and you know, I'm very, very lucky. It's a figure, you know, so I can have my interpretations of Pepe. It fit right in with my painting, so I didn't see that there was any, you know, I didn't. I absolutely just brought Pepe into what I was doing. So it was just really extraordinary to experience Pepe. And there's a lot of, you know, other things, you know, doing some apes and doing Murphers. You know, I really love the community. It works through visual means. It just suits me as an artist. This is really a phenomenal thing.
And it's funny. I think it's symptomatic of a lot of things at the minute because obviously traditional media tried to take Pepe and turn it into something that our community doesn't know it as in terms of making
Yeah,
it a racist symbol. But the community fought back,
yeah,
and that felt like an underlying win against traditional media, traditional, I don't know what they call it, autocratic societies. Who knows?
yeah.
It felt like we took it back.
Yeah, absolutely. We did. And you know what's extraordinary about Pepe and Web3 is that there's so many forms of Pepe art that every artist suits, whether it's a conceptual artist and, you know, deconstruction like what Batsu does, you know, or whether it's hyper realistic Pepe, or whether it's expressionist Pepe that I do, you know, or whether it's, AI Pepe, you know, that people. So Pepe is extraordinary. It's an expression of the potential of our art world in, you know, in thematic form. It's really phenomenal.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How did you come about? So I was actually reading, obviously, some of your art is around freedom, particularly with your unfortunate background having to deal with some of Holocaust survival issues. Um, So one of the really important parts of your art is around freedom. Is that
Absolutely.
something that resonated with you when we came to the 6529 memes sort of environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the freedom to transact is a really important thing. When I was a young artist, I started reading, as a teenager, I started reading Henry Miller. Henry Miller and Francis Bacon and Goya were, I think, the principal influences on me as an artist. And, Henry Miller was all about freedom. And he's an extraordinary writer, and he wrote about being an artist, and he wrote about the struggles of being an artist. So I got a real introduction to, that what was necessary to be an artist was really freedom. And this is something that resonated with me completely. When I started out in the brick and mortar art world, it was mostly about abstraction, and I was naturally a figurative artist with my roots in Europe, really, and in European figuration. So, I had to be free to do it. It required making a freedom statement to really do that. So, because, the art world is very cliquey and very trendy. And if you do anything other than what the current thing is, like, for example, in the brick and mortar art world right now, I would say the current thing is sort of moody realism of, sexy, realistic paintings. It's just a trend. It's just a fashion. It doesn't mean anything. If you just follow these trends, it gets you nowhere on a deeper level as an artist.
Mm. And it's the same we see reflected in music. There's music that people follow trends, and they'll be trending for maybe a year or two, and then there's people that break the mold.
Yeah.
And they still stand the test of time forever. So it's really fun. How did you come to be introduced to 6529 and the memes?
It was just part of our ecosystem. I thought it was, absolutely phenomenal, the meme cards, and I wanted to be part of it right away. I thought, wow, this is really, really great. So, I applied, and, I was, somehow accepted, and I did my piece Voices. I thought that's really, a great opportunity. I have a meme lab piece that I'm planning on releasing at some point, which has a lot to do with all of the memes and declaration of digital rights and, my meme card and the Voices. So, I'm very into what I think also is really great about the 6529 meme cards is it is a context that allows all of the diversity of artists in our community to express something in a framework where it could be seen together as one grand show. And so it's not just about your individual voice, but how your individual voice uplifts the rest of the community and participates in the dialogue of all of us artists.
Yeah, the whole movement has been so fun to watch, and I think what resonates with a lot of people as well. You've got like a very positive attitude generally, and a lot of people don't expect to see, with all due respect, an artist of your age within that community. So
yeah, I love
think
that.
people love that.
Yeah, I really love that I've been accepted. Even though I'm much older than a lot of these artists, and I don't think age grants me any privilege. I just happen to be doing this longer, and I just feel privileged to have gotten away with being an artist for so long. And so what I really do want to be part of the live art world. I don't want to be somebody that did something years ago and people go, oh yeah, well that was great, and they remember me. I think being part of, again, this goes back to Henry Miller. He divided the world into two categories: the quick and the dead. I want to be part of the quick. This Web3 is a lot of energy in all these young artists. I think it's phenomenal. I'm glad they've very graciously let me swim in the water with them. I think it's phenomenal. I'm very, very grateful for it.
I think it'd be stupid of them not to. It's important to, with everything being so new and things being constructed in new ways, it's important to have some experience alongside to, because you'll have
Well, I
seen
don't
trends
even
like
know if
this.
my experience adds anything to anybody here
It
because
does.
well, that's really nice, but I really love being part of it. There's in the brick and mortar world, there is a lot of ageism. There's a lot of keeping people out because you were from another time. You get categorized. Well, he's a neo-expressionist, so not part of what people are doing now. I think art is happening all around us simultaneously, many different movements. That's what the open metaverse is all about, and that's really extraordinary. So I don't know. I'm just another artist. I think that's the value I add. So I don't, I'm just grateful to be here and participating. It's really a thrill for me to see another artist that's, the age of my children, that I'm on the same wall with them. That's fantastic. I don't think I should just be on my art should be on the wall with other 69-year-olds, although a show called 69 could be quite cool.
Yes.
Yeah. But I really just love being part of it. So I'm very grateful to be part of the 6529 meme community. Same thing with the notables, notable or not. I'm just thrilled to have been accepted into the notable community and doing notable Pepes. But the same thing is true with fake rares. Nobody said to me, "Oh, you're too old" or "You're a has-been." This is really it's phenomenal to be alive and be recognized as being alive. There's plenty of time for me to be dead when I'm dead.
Web3 just throws out the rulebook on ageism, culturalism, and a lot of other societal labels that we give to people, particularly if you're undoxed. You're kind of dismissing a lot of that stuff straight away. So you're judged on your contribution to the ecosystem, which I love.
Right. Well, I was always public as an artist, so I never had the choice to dox myself to be anonymous. I actually, I like it. I like being able to, instead of actually writing a text to make a video. I do see there can be some benefits, but I also think there's some disadvantages to being anonymous for an artist. I think people want to really know who you are when you're an artist and understand your life and see your personality. So I think that sometimes is helpful to my audience to just know me.
I think so. I definitely think so in your case.
Yeah.
Now, something you posted last week, I read probably 4 or 5 times, and I found it quite impactful. And it's a sensitive topic, so please only share what you feel comfortable with. But it was your post around suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what that post was for people that might not have seen it?
Yeah, well, I found out a friend of mine committed suicide, and at first, I wasn't told about it. I was just told that he died, and I think it's very sad that there was so much shame around it. But on the other hand, it was very difficult to find out that out. And I try to be very open about what's going on for me in my lifetime. Like, for example, I'm public about that. There's certain things I'm not public about. Like, my children would not like me to share details about their life or about their children or anything about their life, and I don't. But I'm public about what I'm going through, and so I talked about my friend a little bit in that post. I don't want to paraphrase it because I was very careful about how I wrote it. I do think in Web3 that we also have this great opportunity to share with each other about very deep, sensitive subjects. And a lot of people get something from understanding there's a commonality out there. I know that, my words were very widely received, and a lot of people shared that they had experiences similar to mine. And, I think that's also another great opportunity that we have here in Web3, that we are part of a real community where we we talk to each other about real events in our lifetime with real sensitivity. It's not all about advertising. It's not about posturing. It's not about looking good. It's not about cosmetics. In the internet culture that we live in, a lot of stuff is really fake. And I think we're all fed up with a lot of fakeness. There's room for realness. And that's another thing about freedom, is let's be free and be real.
Yeah, and I think over the past 3 years in particularly, there's been a big swing against that, against corporations who put on this fake, outwardly sounding things. I think the suicide thing is of interest to me because I grew up in quite a working class, difficult area, and although I didn't have anyone that I was direct friends with, friends of friends, and quite a few unfortunately did that, and I just saw the really conflicting emotions. There was emotions from that person thinking that their friend was selfish. Then there was other emotions thinking, oh God, what were they going through? And they just didn't know how to process it. And so I think it's really important to talk about the fact that you will have conflicting emotions. You won't just think, oh, I feel sorry for that person. And you won't just think, oh, that person's selfish for doing that. You'll have a myriad of these things.
Yeah, well, it's very important to express yourself, I believe. And, I take advantage of that in this ecosystem that we're in. I'll say that I think we're lucky in crypto Twitter because there is the possibility of expressing ourselves more, perhaps, on Twitter than there is, for example, in some of the other social media. I'm not on Facebook because I kind of despise Facebook, but I am on Instagram. But what I've noticed on Instagram is that there's just, so much posturing and so much trying to present everything from, one very limited cosmetic point of view that it serves no one. Perhaps it serves the interests of the Meta Corporation, but I think we all need to go beyond that.
I think so too. The one piece of luck that I think we can mutually agree on is that you met your lovely partner, Jonat.
Absolutely.
That's the one thing we'll agree on, Michael.
Well, I don't know if that's luck. She made me work. She made me work at proving my love. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. That is the really luckiest thing in my life. And I want to just say something about that. I get a lot of help. Yanat is really extraordinary in that, my transition to Web3, she's helped me with all of that. People often remark how I answer everybody and I pay attention to every little detail. Well, she reminds me of a lot of it, and she really helps me with a lot of it. It in order to get all this work out, just even minting things, she helps with everything. So really, she's an extraordinary partner and a really brilliant person. Sometimes she hides behind me, but she's a lot brighter than me. So
I could sense that she was a really strong part of this, so I wanted to make sure that she got our flowers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
No, it's the same, and my partner's the same. My partner helps me function on a day-to-day basis when I forget to drink water or eat.
Yeah,
she's in the background.
Reminds me of all the necessities too. And actually, there are many times when I completely just take off and paint, for example, and keeps the whole thing going. So I'm very, very fortunate. And that's not something you can't hire an assistant to do what's really in your heart. So Yanat sees everything completely from my point of view and makes it her own and helps me. I've been extraordinarily blessed in that respect.
It's just that constant, undeniable and unwavering support for what you want to do. I saw that the other day. I was like, because I commented on it and I said, I love it. This sounds a bit creepy. because
Yeah.
it sounds very Twilight Zone sort of.
Yeah, we play a lot of really moody, kind of weird music. Yeah, we love that. It's something we do together. It's really extraordinary for us. Yeah, it's another form of creation. I just love it. It's different than painting, and I just love doing it. Yeah, we
Yeah,
both
I can
love
tell.
doing it.
I can tell. Well, I am going to be in New York early September potentially. So if you're around, love
Yeah,
to swing by
absolutely. That'll be
and
great.
see the studio at some point. But thank you so much. As I say, this was so heavily requested by the community, and I am so excited to share it with them all.
Awesome. Let me know when it's on, and I'd love to share it too. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much, Stuart.
Michael, and send my regards to Jonat as well, please.
I will, absolutely. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.